I love this ranch. It is wonderful. I love the sea, and I love the mountains and the hollows and the hills, and the shady places in the creek and the fine old oaks.
Three-quarters of a century ago, a man stood atop a grassy knoll and built a dream. In the twilight of his years, the dream became reality. A living museum for his finest art and architectural treasures. And now, a legacy for all the people. This is the story of William Randolph Hearst and his castle. I'm John Forsythe. Let's take a closer look. La Cuesta Encantada, the Enchanted Hill. That's what William Randolph Hearst named his hilltop. It is still a source of enchantment, luring millions of visitors to view the 123 acres of palatial gardens, pools, guest houses, the magnificent mansion of La Casa Grande, and the collection housed within. The mystique of a rich history permeates Hearst Castle. Once this was an opulent private estate that was entered only by privileged invitation. Its spaces echoed the voices of the luminaries of Hollywood's movie colony and the greats of the world. The inhabitants and their famous guests have vanished, yet their presence haunts the ornately appointed rooms. Most of all is felt the presence of William Randolph Hearst, the builder, the collector, the man. The Visitor Center exhibit chronicles the colorful life and career of this extraordinary man. His accomplishments are of unbelievable proportion. He was not only an extravagant collector of art, but also an influential politician, a giant of journalism, and an innovator in the early years of the motion picture industry. His story begins with George Hearst, a westering pioneer endowed with a desire to look beyond his horizon. Looking toward the El Dorado of the West, he heeded the call of the gold rush, migrating from Missouri farmlands to the Pacific shore. His first fortune was made in the silver mines of the Comstock Lode, a fortune that was doubled and redoubled as his name became synonymous with the richest gold and silver strikes. He accumulated vast tracts of land before his death. But it was here in the Santa Lucia Mountains of San Simeon that he made his most significant purchase, the nucleus of 250,000 acres that one day would become the site of California's greatest showplace and home for one of the nation's great art collections. William Randolph, the Hearst's only child, was born in San Francisco in 1863. From Phoebe Apperson Hearst, he acquired a thirst for knowledge and an appreciation of art. At the age of 10, he traveled through Europe with his mother, the age of 23, Hollywood and its people became integral to his life at San Simeon.
Miss Morgan, we are tired of camping out in the open at the ranch in San Simeon, and I would like to build a little something.
These words were but a modest entreaty from a client to his architect. The phenomenon of Hearst Castle was about to spring forth. For this, in all its vivid splendor, was what W.R. Hearst had in mind. This was a man's dream. This was a woman's doing. Julia Morgan was one of the first women to practice architecture. A graduate of the University of California at Berkeley with a degree in civil engineering, she was the first woman to be certified by the École des Beaux-Arts in Paris. Her credit of 450 commissions and 20 years' experience made her suited to the increasingly grandiose dream that would challenge her imagination for another 28 years. Thousands of blueprints and drawings exist for San Simeon. Mr. Hearst's ideas were so fluid that alterations were frequent. Changes were sometimes made after construction had been completed. At the time of his death, 3 decades later, his home remained unfinished.
Heaven is perfection, and perfection may be obtainable with God's help right here on earth, at our own door, and through the work of our own hand.
Before construction could begin, supplies had to be brought in by coastal steamer. A wharf at San Simeon and an old ranch road were improved to gain access to the site. Giant oaks in the way of construction were encased in huge tubs of concrete and moved to areas sodded with soil, carted up the hill from below. All the construction materials, lumber, cement, steel beams, were laboriously hauled up the hill. The 3 guest houses were nearly completed before construction began on the main house in 1922. Referred to as simply A, B, or C house in the beginning, each was later named according to its view. La Casa del Mar, House of the Sea, La Casa del Monte, House of the Mountain, and La Casa del Sol, House of the Sun. The design is Mediterranean revival with Italianate or Hispanic Moresque detailing. These cottages, as Mr. Hearst called them, contain 48 rooms altogether. If there is a symbol of the beginning and the end of Mr. Hearst's reign on the Enchanted Hill, it is La Casa del Mar. Completed in 1922, it was the first and largest guest house constructed on the hill. It was occupied by Mr. Hearst and his family until the late 1920s, when La Casa Grande was ready to receive them. Almost 3 decades later, in failing health, Mr. Hearst returned to the comfort of its smaller quarters to spend his final days at San Simeon. Often considered the most elegant of the 3 houses, its 20 rooms were lavished with an exotic blend of Italian, Spanish, and Moorish art and furnishings.
A 15th century Italian cassone depicts the rape of Lucretia. This sitting room is an intriguing blend of simplicity and lavish ornamentation. Della Robbia art. A carpet with nomadic influence. An Italian table. And overhead a ceiling of Islamic designs. The Madonna is dated the 15th century. This second-floor bedroom is called the Hero Room. Above the 17th century 4-poster bed is hung a Spanish banner of the same era. The Spanish heroes that give the room its name are portrayed in the replica of an antique ceiling once seen by Julia Morgan and Mr. Hearst. The interior of La Casa del Monte, the smallest house, is reminiscent of a cozy Italian villa. The Renaissance era brought new importance to individual expression, and artists gave full play to originality and craftsmanship. A hope chest, or marriage chest, from the Barberini family of Florentine Italy is covered with symbols of fertility. Almost 500 years ago, an Italian woodworker painstakingly carved this walnut cabinet, the craftsmanship of a vanished era. One of the most striking examples of Italian woodwork is the bed made for the Balbi family of Genoa, Italy. The 3 fish carved on the headboard are probably a symbol of the family name. The window treatments are not antique. They are gold leaf cast plaster work designed by Julia Morgan. Paintings of the Renaissance era were frequently unsigned. This work by an unknown artist is The Mystical Marriage of St. Catherine.
A copy of Donatello's David stands before La Casa del Sol. Each house is a small palace in its own right, yet each fades to relative simplicity when compared with the main house. The group of buildings resembles an Italian hill town. Towering over all, as would a monastery or cathedral in that town, is the imposing edifice of La Casa Grande. A medieval or Renaissance ecclesiastic theme is predominant in its blend of architectural influences. This is apparent not only in the facade, but will be seen within the rooms and the artifacts of the collection. The motif of the twin towers topping the 137 feet high structure is derived from a church in Ronda, Spain. Each tower is fitted with 18 Belgian carillon bells. A Spanish design with pronounced Oriental overtones is found in the exotic teakwood gable. The design of the front entrance is based on an old cathedral entrance. A number of 13th to 16th century reliefs and Spanish Gothic sculptures complete the powerful illusion of a Spanish cathedral. While La Casa Grande was being constructed, the grounds were being developed on a scale no less magnificent. The estate's highly individual architectural character is reflected in the artistry of the Neptune pool. Greek-style colonnades rise from a marble floor, a symphony of classic line and graceful contour. The pool was enlarged 3 times and took 12 years to perfect. Its 104 feet length holds 345,000 gallons of water that in Mr. Hearst's time was heated year-round. The basin is faced with white Vermont marble. Its grid design is verd antique, a dark green marble. The blue color is only a refraction of the light. All the statuary groups around the pool were sculpted by French sculptor Charles Cassou in the 1920s. The graceful birth of Venus rises in its alcove, appearing to float on the surface of the water. The Greco-Roman temple was constructed from a variety of architectural fragments, probably dating from the later centuries of the Roman era. Neptune, although deprived of his symbol of power, the trident, presides over his watery domain. A scene of Byzantine splendor is mirrored in the waters of the Roman pool. Overhead, underfoot, and on every side, Venetian tiles bejewel the concrete interior. 22-karat gold leaf fused within glass laces the brilliant blue mosaic and gives animation to the sea life motif. Hand-cut and hand-set, the tile is so precisely lined that artisans labored 3.5 years to complete the structure. A gold mosaic gallery extends over the pool, a luxurious platform from which swimmers could dive. Amid the profusion of color and grandeur, glowing, graceful statuary fills the eye with visual poetry. Once these walls echoed the sounds of revelry in the moonlight glow of alabaster lamps. Only the statues remain, silent sentinels in this world of liquid beauty. A play of light and shadow, a glisten of cool green foliage. This is the serenity of the gardens on the Enchanted Hill. The gardens were planned so that every piece of statuary would be displayed to its best advantage. All the marble is Carrara marble from the quarries of northern Italy. The whitest and purest, it was the same used by Michelangelo. Many of the works were commissioned in the 1920s. The original Three Graces were sculpted by Antonio Canova. This is a copy by Boyer. The figures represent brilliance, joy, and bloom. A sarcophagus, once used by the Romans as a coffin for above-ground interment. The transformation of a rocky hilltop presented a special challenge. Dynamite charges were used to create basins. Thousands of tons of rich planting soil were trucked in from the lowlands. Water was piped from springs 5 miles away. About 180 varieties of ornamental and citrus trees were transplanted amid the carefully preserved native live oaks that Mr. Hearst loved. For a quarter of a century, Mr. Hearst worked to create his heaven on the hilltop.
The time to retire is when God retires you, not before.
But time was running out. It was 1951, and he was 88 years old. In 1957, La Cuesta Encantada was presented to the state of California. As a state historical monument, it is preserved for the public as a memorial to William Randolph Hearst and to his mother, Phoebe Apperson Hearst. For the first time, the doors of La Casa Grande were open to the public. The richness and variety of art and antiques were revealed. Through these rooms, visitors now traced the footsteps where names legendary in memory have walked. It was the vast spaces of the assembly room that greeted guests upon their arrival at La Casa Grande. Stunned, perhaps bewildered, surely most new arrivals could only stare at the splendor spread before them. The 83 by 31 foot room, the largest in the castle, is a treasure house.
Hearst Castle is unique in a sense that it gives the visitor a chance to see how art was collected for someone's use in a home. Many of the 19th century collectors actually did amass their great collections for their own use, but generally speaking, those became the basis for the art museums in the United States, the Metropolitan Museum of Art, Chicago Institute of Arts. However, there are a few instances left in the United States where these great homes are still available for people to see, where you can see the art in context. And I think that that tells people a lot about the culture of our American history at the time. What was the Gilded Age about? Opulence, gathering in of European wealth, and the ability to become one of those parts of society. At Hearst Castle, you can not only see the art on the walls and study a particular piece, but you can see how it was created as part of a home.
The great room accommodates magnificent art pieces. Venus Triumphant has won a beauty contest. The apple she holds is her prize. This one of a pair of bronze river gods is Renaissance Italian. In 16th century France, gifts were presented in this ebony and polished rock crystal casket. Diversity of taste is represented by a vase of 300-year-old Persian pottery. This 400-year-old diptych from Sardinia is of rare and unusual quality. A 17th century Spanish portrayal of the Crucifixion. This one is the Annunciation.
Mr. Hearst began his tapestry collection with a few pieces belonging to his mother. A diversity of styles and techniques are represented. The four great Renaissance-style hangings that virtually cover the side walls depict the deeds of Scipio Africanus, the Roman general who defeated Hannibal during the Second Punic War. They were designed by the 16th century artist Giulio Romano, a student of Raphael, and are thought to have been part of the French royal collection prior to the Revolution. The battle scenes conclude with triumphant Scipio receiving tribute from the defeated Carthaginian officers, and, as an elderly man, tribute from the people. The flowing Baroque style of 17th century artist Peter Paul Rubens depicts the triumph of Christianity over paganism. It was purchased by Mr. Hearst in the 1920s for about $6,000, only a little more than 1/10 of his daily income at that time. The 1890s silver and cloisonné lamp is by Tiffany & Company. Mr. Hearst loved art, but he also enjoyed the conveniences. A radio was once concealed in this walnut cabinet. He embraced the art of collecting with unbounded enthusiasm, not only filling the 115 rooms of La Casa Grande, but also those of 6 other estates. Among his voluminous purchases, a few pieces are known to have been his favorites.
This was his most prized possession, this Mille Fleurs tapestry made 550 years ago in Arras, France.
The stunning Gothic tapestry of a hunting scene with horses, dogs, trees, and flowers growing everywhere, hence the name 1,000 Flowers. The sporting motif is continued throughout the room. 1920s Brunswick billiard tables and the 15th century Spanish Gothic ceiling painted with bullfight scenes. The Mille Fleurs tapestry is believed to be one of the few left in the entire world from late medieval times. Its hunting scene effectively depicts life in that time period. Tapestries were the newspapers of the day. Perhaps that is why Mr. Hearst liked them so much. The stone walls are faced with antique Persian tiles, all dating from the 17th to 19th century. In keeping with the motif of the room, the theme is entertainment.
To Mr. Hearst, San Simeon was the ranch, his home, and as such was to be enjoyed by his family and friends. To those who came to the Enchanted Hill during his reign, it must have seemed like a unique resort hotel. It was the roaring 20s and the fabulous 30s. W.R. Hearst's eminence as a motion picture producer made him an influential member of Hollywood society. San Simeon was the gathering place for the great stars of the motion picture industry. Cary Grant, Luella Parsons, and Louis B. Mayer. Mr. Hearst launched several movie careers, among them Marion Davies. Formerly of the Ziegfeld Follies, she became the foremost star of Mr. Hearst Motion Pictures. For 2 decades, she played opposite most of the leading men in Hollywood.
Facing the east and receiving the sunrise, the morning room was a cheerful gathering place for the guests of San Simeon. Here they would take coffee and after breakfast depart for the day's activities. Four Flemish tapestries portray pastoral scenes of the 4 seasons, an eloquent depiction of rural life in the 17th century. In this room, as in all the rooms, the art objects and furnishings are from diverse time periods. A 16th century chest provides a resting place for 20th century ceramic pots, and a 17th century chest from the Netherlands. On the south wall is a 3-paneled altarpiece that was painted in the 15th century for a cathedral in Spain.
It's very different to come here than it is to go to an art museum where you'd see a gallery with all the 14th century paintings in a room. Here everything blends together, and Hearst worked with Julia Morgan, his architect, to be able to get these things to blend together and not be discordant. And for the most part, I think it works, even though you have a great span of time being represented from antiquities from the BC times up until the 1930s.
For Mr. Hearst's guests who may have desired to experience a time span in yet another medium, there was San Simeon's greatest treasure of imagination, the library. It is warm and welcoming, this time capsule of a room, where knowledge is spread so abundantly before us. The years fall away as we are invited on a journey back to the eras of the Greco-Roman empires, birthplace of Western thought, of Western civilization. The room abounds in antiquities, both of and representative of those time periods. A chariot driven by Minerva, Roman goddess of wisdom and the arts. Over a span of 50 years, Mr. Hearst accumulated one of the greatest private collections of Greek vases ever held. 155 pieces dating from 700 BC to 300 BC remain at San Simeon. Other pieces come from various areas around the Mediterranean. This vase is Persian, dating from the 9th or 10th century AD. Winged horses were carefully incised more than 2,000 years ago on this bronze Etruscan cista. This Greek amphora of the 6th century BC was a souvenir replica of the trophy presented to a winner of the Pan-Athenaic Games. Rhytons, or drinking horns, were so designed that they could not be set down until the drink was finished. Mr. Hearst's collection of books began at age 10 with German picture books, which were later to inspire him with the creation of the first newspaper comic strip, The Katzenjammer Kids. Almost 5,000 volumes are contained in this repository of modern thought and ancient art. Fertility symbols boldly carved on a 400-year-old marriage chest from France. Winged figures from mythology support a monastic dining table. These two pieces are of the later Renaissance era, that which marks the development of Western civilization. The door to a room of the Renaissance era is opened, and in the warmth of its decor and glowing colors is sensed the flowering of that transition from medieval to modern times. The Renaissance marked an awakening of brilliant accomplishment in the arts. The process of making terracotta or glazed pottery permanent by coating it with enamel was perfected by the Della Robbia family of Italy.
The opulence of a Venetian palace is suggested in the decor of the Doge Suite. Against a backdrop of rich silk brocatelle-covered walls, the essence of the Italian Renaissance is captured in its furnishings and art objects. The painted ceiling is 17th century. This work is the Betrothal of St. Catherine. The Holy Family is from the 18th century. A Majolica inkstand of the 1500s portrays St. George slaying the dragon. The two Urbino pots on either side are also Majolica ware of the 1600s. The small figures carved on this 400-year-old cabinet have earned it the name of bambocci. Supported by the Florentine figure, an alabaster lamp casts a soft glow upon the room. This bedroom was a luxurious welcome for the suite's guests. Molded door framings surround a 300-year-old sacristy door from a Spanish cathedral.
In those long ago days between two world wars, the Enchanted Hill rang with the sounds of laughter and play. It was St. Simeon's golden days, an era of entertainment that would not be seen again. Movies were screened in the theater, often before they were released to the public. At 9 in the evening, dinner was served in the great dining hall, the refectory. Today, in the muted stillness of this cathedral-like room, we listen for a faint tinkle of glassware and silver, an echo of laughter, and we imagine the gaiety that was once upon a time. Blue willow china and condiments in bottles were set out along the table, informal reminders of Mr. Hearst's earlier days spent on Camp Hill. Amid the drama of this Gothic setting, famous personalities were seated at 300-year-old monastery tables. Dante chairs, the folding portable chairs of that era, were substituted for the hard benches that once seated the monks. Pretend that we can see a guest list of people who were here. Greta Garbo is seated there, across from Rudolph Valentino. Mary Pickford across from Douglas Fairbanks. Clark Gable here across from Carol Lombard. Leslie Howard across from David Niven. Mr. Hearst always sat at the center of the table, and across from him, Marion Davies, George Bernard Shaw, Marie Dressler, Bob Hope, Bob Cummings, and Charlie Chaplin.
While dining, those seated at mid-table could view an outstanding collection of 17th and 18th century silver. This French wine cistern is 200 years old and weighs 30 pounds. A mace from Dublin, Ireland, a symbol of authority. The bishop's banner was carried in a religious processional to mark his location for the crowd of onlookers. Silk flags are part of the biannual Palio Festival held in Siena, Italy. These are copies. The fragile 18th century originals are in storage. The Daniel tapestries portray scenes of events in the life of the prophet Daniel and encounters with King Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon. They are Flemish, of the early 15th century. Overhead, 13 full-sized saints have watched over humanity for nearly 400 years. 600-year-old choir stalls are used as paneling on a portion of a wall.
A large staff was required to maintain the castle and to tend the needs of Mr. Hearst and his guests. Let's take a look behind the scenes. The kitchen that served the tables of the refectory is cold and silent today. But once it rang with the voices and hurried footsteps of the staff as they prepared the feast to provide the hospitality for which the host was noted. Mr. Hearst entertained frequently, and his guests could number from 6 to 100 people. Caring for their needs required a kitchen as large and as well equipped as that of a hotel. Mr. Hearst also kept an extensive wine cellar in the basement. There were vintages to complement every meal. Retirement to the cloisters at the end of the day must have been a vivid experience for the first-time visitors to the castle, akin to falling asleep in the private room of a museum. A Spanish painting of the 1600s, its colors muted by the touch of centuries, is challenged by a vividly hued Chinese dragon of the 1900s. A Spanish chest, the Papelera, with Islamic influence, is similar to a steamer trunk. Being a nomadic people, these chests were important to the Islamic people for transporting their belongings. The Virgin and Child, dated the 15th century, is one of the older paintings in the collection. Intricately detailed Spanish panels of the same time period, originally part of an altarpiece, portray events in the life of St. Martin. A Gothic alabaster fireplace is carved with the figures of 9 saints flanking the figure of Christ. The delicate Oriental lady, carved of jade, is of 19th century origin. Located high above the terrace in La Casa Grande's towers, the celestial suite was reserved for special guests. The intricately carved and painted wood, the arabesque grillwork of its arched windows, created an exotic sanctuary. The imposing presence of a 600-year-old Gothic ceiling covers the most private domain in the castle, Mr. Hearst's bedroom. This modest room, one of the smallest of the 42 bedrooms, once held the most personal mementos of his life. This gold-laden painting of the early 14th century, the earliest in the collection, was a gift from fellow publisher Sissy Patterson. A silver sanctuary lamp suspended from the Hispano-Moresque ceiling lights the simple elegance of the Gothic suite's north bedroom. The walls are hung with 6 distinguished Italian paintings of the 14th and 15th centuries. Spanned by the massive arches of its ceiling, Mr. Hearst's sitting room is a Gothic repository of medieval and religious works of art. The church was the patron of the arts in 16th and 17th century Spain and Italy. Therefore, a religious theme prevailed in the artwork of that period. The Gothic study, the heartbeat of the Hearst Empire. In this personal place, we can feel the presence of this powerful, enigmatic man. Guests were generally not allowed here. Business meetings were held in this room. Mr. Hearst owned 94 businesses and kept in contact through his teletype and telephone switchboard. Here he wrote his daily editorials. Through them, he expressed a lifelong philosophy of journalism.
The newspaper is a moral force second only to the church. It is a political power superior to parties. It is an instrument of justice co-equal with the court. It is the torch which liberty holds aloft for the enlightenment of the world.
The strength of the man, tempered with his love of the arts, may be reflected in the construction of his inner sanctum.
The archways above us are actually concrete. They are not antiques. They are concrete structure, part of the building itself, and the paintings on it were done by a craftsman named Camille Solon, who was one of Hearst's workers here on site, to blend in with the antiques on site.
A collection of very fine antique cups of various styles were Mr. Hearst's personal pleasure. This ivory drinking cup, called a Hannah, is dated 1680 and is from Germany. Figures from mythology are displayed in its theme. A silver tankard made around 1700 from Augsburg. A silver monstrance from a Spanish cathedral was once used to hold the host. It was made in the 16th century. The gold vermeil pineapple cup was made in Russia in 1776. The top was removed for drinking. A 17th century ivory tankard displays symbols of prosperity. Its handle is gilded silver. A gilded salt cellar was once displayed on the palatial table of a 17th century German family. A drinking horn, dated the 15th century, also from Germany. This 20th century piece depicts Ganymede resting on the marble wings of Zeus in the form of an eagle. This silver wax jack, dated 1780, dispensed sealing wax in an English household. Of all Mr. Hearst's estates, San Simeon was his favorite. While in residence here, he directed his vast holdings until he was in his 80s. Mr. Hearst's days at San Simeon were not entirely devoted to work. He enjoyed his home and the company of his guests. Costume parties were a favorite form of entertainment. An ample wardrobe was provided to suit any flight of fancy.
The last addition to La Casa Grande, the North Wing, was begun in 1929. Its rooms are a composite of elegance and simplicity of design. The arches were painted by Camille Solon, the artisan of the Gothic study. These storybook murals were his last major work at San Simeon. A 16th century Spanish example of carved, painted, and gilded wood. Old world figures look upon a unique modern lamp. The on-off switch is near Florida. A royal Persian silk rug from Tabriz is decorated with calligraphy in Farsi, an ancient Persian language. It has been dated 1782. A carpet woven with the coat of arms of an unknown Spanish family fills an alcove wall of the West Tower Room. The 19th century silk carpet, its intricate details, a kaleidoscope of color, is one of the finest in the collection. Mr. Hearst must have surrounded himself with a few loved artifacts from his youth. The delicate Portuguese table once belonged to his mother. The 20th century copy of a Murillo painting was also part of her collection. One of the more important paintings in the collection is The Assumption of the Virgin with St. James by Claudio Coelho. It is dated 1677. These gold-covered wood-carved figures were mounted on rods and carried in religious processionals.
Interpretation of Hearst Castle, its history and its art collection, can only be served through the dedicated work of conservators, the staff members who work behind the scenes to restore, maintain, and preserve the Hearst San Simeon State Historical Monument and the works of art for the enjoyment of generations to come. A poultice is applied to a marble statue to draw stains and impurities from the stone. Workers strive to maintain the perfection of the gardens on the Enchanted Hill. Striving for perfection and the joy of its attainment was a daily thread William Randolph Hearst wove into his tapestry of life. Among the dark-hued threads of disappointment, there were many that were joyous. On this sunlit summit, the bright strands of the carefree times of his adult life filled the fabric with golden moments. The tapestry is complete, but the liquid music of memories still flows around San Simeon. The snow melts on the mountain, and the water runs down to the spring, and the spring in a turbulent fountain with a song of youth to sing, runs down to the riotous river, and the river flows to the sea. And the water again goes back in rain to the hills where it used to be. And I wonder if life's deep mystery isn't much like the rain and the snow, returning through all eternity to the places it used to know. For life was born on the lofty heights and flows in a laughing stream to the river below, whose onward flow ends in a peaceful dream. And so at last, when our life has passed and the river has run its course, it again goes back o'er the self-same track to the mountain which was its source.